Time now is 5:03, taxing the rich in order to help everyone else. It's an idea that President Obama is floating in Washington with the help of millionaires and billionaires.
KOLO 8 News Now's Pat Hambright has spent the past couple of days in Washington, D.C., and in a rare Reno television exclusive, he spoke with the president about a so-called Buffett rule. So he joins us live right now from the White House to tell us about this meeting. Pat?
Good morning, Kai. Call it tackling the income gap or maybe closing loopholes for the wealthiest Americans. The president is bound to determine that those who earn more should pay more so that the nation's economy can get back on track.
So we've got to balance that by asking those like myself who can afford to do a little more to do so. Because if we don't, then either it means the deficit continues to get increased because we're getting tax breaks we don't need and the country can't afford, or we're putting an additional burden on the student in terms of paying higher rates on their student loans, or a senior who's got to pay higher rates for their Medicare prescriptions, or that veteran maybe doesn't get the services they need to readjust after they've served us and our country. And that's not a good recipe for growing our economy. And that's a major debate that we're going to be having.
Now, by looking into his eyes, you can tell that the president is very serious about these efforts. He sees that the Bush-era tax cuts are not only unnecessary, but for too long, many wealthy Americans have simply been able to take advantage of something that just is simply not available to the average citizen. Now, it is an interesting debate, considering that polls show that many swing voters, including those here in Nevada, don't necessarily agree that the current tax system is unfair. Reporting live from our mobile newsroom at the White House, Pat Hambright, KOLO 8 News Now.
Pat, now is there any Republican response from Nevada legislators to the Buffett rule?
Well, Amanda, while we were here in Washington, we did make an effort to catch up with Congressman Amodei and Senator Dean Heller to get their thoughts on this. Both of them actually happen to be back in Nevada this week visiting with constituents. But Heller's office did send us out a statement regarding his position on it against the Buffett rule. Basically, he's coming out against it. The Nevada Republicans saying while Nevada struggles with high unemployment, the president and Senate Democrats have chosen to focus on a measure that will not create a single job. Heller calling this tax hike nothing more than an election year campaign gimmick. Amanda, back to you.
Pat,
all right. Thanks a lot, Pat. This is an incredible opportunity, and we're going to hear from him another 4 times in the show about different topics.
It's exciting to see him sitting there with the president. I love it. And remember, you can watch Pat's entire interview on our web channel, kolotv.com.
Here's another big story. President Obama gave KOLO 8 News Now a rare chance to interview him on his own turf. Pat Hambright is live in Washington this morning with a preview of what the president said.
Well, Kai, different plans, different ideas. We are live in Washington, D.C. this morning with details on why the president thinks the Republican budget plan is bad for Nevadans.
Thing that is on everyone's mind, the economy and how to fix it. And it's going to be one of the major issues dividing Democrats and Republicans during this campaign.
The presidential election is focusing efforts on how to pull America out of this longest downturn that we've seen since the Great Depression. KOLO 8 News Now's Pat Hambright was given the opportunity to speak one-on-one with the president about his plans for an economic recovery. He joined us live right now from the White House with more on this. What can you tell us, Pat?
Good morning, Kai. President Obama, as you just mentioned, faces a serious divide in Washington. Now, he can usually count on support from the democratically controlled Senate, but in the House, it's a different matter. The Republican majority and the Ryan budget plan that they've come up with has put the president on the offensive in attempting to show that their ideas are bad for the middle class.
So the issue here is how do we take a balanced, common sense approach to how we grow the economy? There's a school of thought that says if you just cut everything, give this money back in terms of tax breaks, that the economy is going to grow. The problem is we actually tried that. In the 8 years before I took office, that exactly was what the previous administration proposed. Big tax cut in 2001, big tax cut in 2003. We had the slowest job growth we'd seen in a very long time. Wages and incomes for middle-class families in Nevada and elsewhere actually went down when you adjust for inflation, even as the cost of health care and other things were going up. And it culminated in the worst financial crisis and economic crisis we've seen since the Great Depression.
Now, the president is attacking their plan by suggesting that we use other tactics, such as cutting programs that don't work and keeping ones that do. And a big part of his funding strategy is ending, as you heard, those Bush-era tax cuts. Republicans, though, are fighting hard in order to keep them. It's a philosophical difference that Nevadans are bound to get a full dose of, as once again, state could play a role in the presidential election as one of a handful of swing states where voters literally could go either way. Reporting live from our mobile newsroom in Washington, D.C., Pat Hambright, KOLO 8 News Now.
So Pat, he wants to keep that Bush tax cut money in Washington there. Any idea what he would do with it if he was able to keep it?
Well, the programs that he says he wants to keep, you need to pay for those, and things are tight, and the president doesn't want to underestimate the budget shortfall that we have, but he wants to use that money and then further money from the so-called Buffett rule to pay for programs that he thinks that we need to keep. So a central part of what the president is trying to get across is we need to find a way to cut, but we also need to keep certain programs. That's a balancing act that we'll get details of in the weeks and months ahead. Kai, back to you.
All right, thanks for getting those details.
Well, unemployment, along with the housing crisis, is one of the major issues that Nevadans have faced during this economic downturn.
In some Nevada counties, the unemployment rate has grown to 17%. This is prompting many to look to Washington, D.C. for solutions.
And with that, we have KOLO 8 News Now's Pat Hambright. He brought that question to the president, and he joins us now live from the White House with more on their conversation. Good morning, Pat.
Well, good morning, Kai and Amanda. Now, one of the questions that we posted on Facebook was what you would ask the president if you had an opportunity to do so. Now, we thought we would get a lot of response, but what we were surprised to find out was that most of our viewers want to know about what the president plans to do about Nevada's housing crisis. But one Facebook fan in particular, that is Sparks resident Don Larson, caught our attention. So on behalf of Mr. Larson, we asked the president his question. And the question is, I bought my home approximately 5 years ago. I put $80K down, everything I could, and my home was worth less than half what I paid for it. I always thought my home would be a big part of my retirement, and now it's a huge deficit. What can be done about me and others like me? This is a question from one of our KOLO 8 News Now Facebook fans, Don Larson of Sparks, Nevada. Don says, I bought my house approximately 5 years ago. I put $80K down, everything I could. My house is now worth less than half what I paid for it. I always thought my home would be a big part of my retirement, and now it's a huge deficit. What can be done about me and others like me?
We need Congress to act so that everybody, including potentially your viewer, is qualified for that. In addition, we've actually provided additional dollars to the state of Nevada and some other states that were especially hard hit so that they can deal with the housing crisis and tailor it to the particular needs of the local market. But the truth of the matter is that with all these efforts that we've done, including, by the way, a housing settlement that's going to result in about $25 billion worth of potential relief, including some principal modification and principal relief. Despite all that work, we've still got a long way to go, especially in a place like Nevada.
So basically, to sum up the president's position, Don, what I took from this is that he would like to tackle the issue of principal reduction, but that banks and Congress are not ready to go along with that. And one of the main reasons is that it seems to be more of an issue that affects Nevada than most other states. So at the moment, there isn't a big national push in order to address it. Reporting live from the White House in our mobile newsroom, Pat Hambright, KOLO 8 News Now.
Okay, Pat, thank you so much. We'll catch up with you a little bit later on in the show.
And you can watch Pat Hambright's complete interview with the president by logging onto our web channel at kolotv.com. We posted the whole thing there. You can follow both Pat and Joe's adventures in Washington on our Facebook page and on Twitter, too.
It's a very exciting opportunity for us and for Pat to see him sitting there. I'm proud of Pat.
Yeah, I was wondering if he got his picture with the president, got his signature and everything.
I'm jealous.
I can't wait to see it.
Own Pat Hambright and Joe Harrington had the privilege of being invited to the White House for a one-on-one conversation with the president.
This trip created memories of a lifetime, to say the least.
So joining us now live from D.C. are KOLO 8 News Now's Pat Hambright and Joe Harrington to give us their impressions of what it was like to be in the White House and to get the privilege to talk with the president. This is a once-in-a-lifetime chance. Good morning, you two.
Well, good morning. An honor, right, Joe?
Oh, absolutely honored, especially as KOLO was one of the only stations chosen for this, the only one on the West Coast. And the story we heard is that the president asked his friend Harry Reid which was a really great station to talk to out west, and that he gave us the recommendation.
Yeah, and 2 days later, here we are. We're actually standing on what's known as Pebble Beach. This is the White House reporter platform. We've got reporters lined up from across the country and from the major news networks covering issues that are affecting nationally. I've heard some North Korea comments. They're looking into the Ann Romney quotes and issues that's going on with
That's the big
politics.
story today here in Washington that all the politicos are talking about. We should say this is called Pebble Beach because this was once a gravel area where all the press was relegated to do their shots, and just one of several areas we've been able to access here at the White House. We were at the press briefing area. At one time, a pool converted into a press briefing area where you see President Obama make all his major speeches and announcements, as well as his press secretary. And you were mentioning we also went into the dip. They call it the dip room,
right,
for short, if you want to get into the Washington lingo here.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. You can see the White House over our shoulders here. Actually a relatively small building when you really think about it. So as we went in there, we go downstairs, it's kind of tight. But all around you, all of a sudden, you realize the artifacts of our nation hanging on the walls, statues here, and then we're escorted in, as you mentioned, the dip room, the diplomatic reception room, you know, where heads of state from around the world come and meet the president
and are
First
frequently
Lady.
photographed in front of a fireplace in that room. And we should say that the room that they had us wait in, known as the map room, another very famous room in the White House, you were mentioning that pretty much everything in the White House is a historic artifact. There were several chairs that George Washington sat in, used when the Capitol was here in Washington, but also in Philadelphia. So just a ton of history here for all the history buffs, as well as the political talks that are going on here, and lots of big political news today, lots to talk about North Korea here in Washington at the White House too.
Yeah, it was kind of funny that you mentioned the artifacts in that room. One of the reporters from St. Louis accidentally sat down in one of the Washington chair sets and was quickly brought up by one of the White House press corps. No, you can't sit there, sir. That's an antique. So you're in a room where FDR did his fireside chats. You're looking at a map on the wall that they used in World War II to keep track of German troop movements. All of this stuff. Old hat for the regular White House press corps. For those of us from Reno, it's kind of neat to see.
That's right. We should say that we did get a few glimpses of things that aren't on the tour. We saw some of the bricks, or should I say stones, that cover an entryway that were damaged when the White House was burned by the British during the War of 1812, and I believe that is not really on the regular tour here. So we got that exclusive kind of look, just among the thrills we were able to experience here. As a matter of fact, as we were just coming on with you, Marine One was landing here on the south lawn of the White House.
Yeah, we're told the president getting ready for a multi-stop tour that's eventually going to go down to Columbia.
Look how
and
excited
there he is.
they are.
Marine One is.
I don't want to cut you
Marine
guys
One's
off.
going off.
You guys, we have to continue this conversation when you get home. You've done a fabulous job. We appreciate you guys so much doing this. We know you've worked hard, and we're proud of you, and we will see you when you get home.
You can watch their entire interview with the president at kolotv.com. You can follow both of them on Twitter and Facebook in real time as they come back here to Reno with all those experiences.
I didn't want to cut him off.
No,
I can't wait to hear more. Okay, really quick, weather-wise.
We do have the wet weather just now starting to spill off the mountains onto the valley floor. So I think we're going to cool down a couple degrees and see maybe a little rain mix in, but the snow should start here in Reno.
Thanks for being with us. It's Friday.
KOLOTV.com.